Hi, my name is Honan, and I am on the board of the Virginia Montessori Association. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experiences. I also am a head of school at Chesapeake Montessori School and the program director for the Virginia Montessori Teacher Education Center as well. One of the commitments that we have made as a board for the Virginia Montessori Association is to move forward personally in our anti-bias, anti-racist practices. And we were at a board meeting a couple months ago, and we took just a few minutes to take turns talking about how each of us is moving forward in our steps. And so I just told them about some things that I was doing, and Trisha, our president, said, "Oh, you need to share that at the conference to talk about what you're doing." And so that's what I'm going to hear. I'm going to talk about what I'm doing from a couple different perspectives. One is a head of school, two is a program director for a teacher education program, and three as a teacher. I also teach grammar and world history in the upper elementary classroom. So I took an ABAR course this summer. I actually had all of my faculty from the Virginia Montessori Teacher Education Center join me in taking this ABAR course. And it was all about, of course, ABAR stands for anti-bias, anti-racist. And what I learned was a lot. I learned that white privilege isn't what I thought it was. And if you've never taken an ABAR course, it's not what you think it is either. I thought that racism was a personal thing. I thought, well, I'm not a racist. I've never been a racist, so I'm good. I learned that's not okay. I have to do better than that. I have to be an anti-racist in order to make a difference. And that changed my entire way of thinking. And it got me thinking about, what am I going to do in my own little world to make things better for everyone? What I learned that I never realized is that there are systems of oppression in place, systems of oppression or racism throughout society that we don't even think about. I certainly didn't think about any of these things, but I learned about them, and I absolutely believe that it's true. So I'm going to give you just a few examples of the idea of white privilege. So the idea behind white privilege is, because you're white, you don't have to worry about certain things, or you have certain privileges because you are white. For instance, because I'm white, I can, if I need to move, I'm pretty sure I can be sure of renting or purchasing a house in an area which I can afford, and also an area in which I'd like to live. And on top of that, I can be pretty sure that my neighbors in such a location will be either neutral or pleasant to me. That's the privilege I have of being white. When I am told about our national heritage or about civilization in general, I can be pretty sure that I will be shown people of my color, people of white, people of Caucasian people, when we talk about the founding of civilization. I can be sure that my children will be given curricular materials that testify to the existence of their race, of the Caucasian race. I can arrange to protect my children most of the time from people who might not like them. I do not have to educate my children to be aware of systematic racism for their own daily physical protection. I can talk with my mouth full, and I don't have people put this down because of my color. I can swear or dress in secondhand clothes or not answer letters without having people attribute these choices to bad morals or because of the poverty or illiteracy of my race. I have never been asked, nor I will ever be asked, to speak for all of the people of my race. I can go home from most meetings of organizations I belong to feeling somewhat tied in, rather than isolated, out of place, outnumbered, unheard, and held at a distance or feared. And all this is because I'm Caucasian. I am not made acutely aware of my shape, bearing, or body odor that will be taken as a reflection of my race. I can worry about racism without being thought of as self-interested or self-seeking. I can take a job with an affirmative action employer without having my coworkers on the job suspect I got the job because of my race. If my day, week, or year is going badly, I need not ask of each negative episode or situation whether those had racial overtones or not. And finally, and this one really got me, I can go to the store and choose flesh-colored Band-Aids that are the color of my flesh. There's so much good literature out there, and there's so much reading you can do, but those are some of the things that really stuck with me. Something else, when I was explaining this to my husband about what white privilege means, he kind of wasn't getting it. And what I said to him was, you know what? We have a son, we have a daughter. Do we have to say to our son, our 20-year-old son, when he goes out at night, do we have to say to him, okay, so don't wear a hoodie, don't put your hands in your pockets, don't put your hood up, don't do this, don't do that. We have the privilege of not having to have those conversations with our son. But I know a lot of my Black friends are already having those conversations with their sons at 8 years old, 7 years old, 9 years old, certainly 20 years old. So that's kind of how I explain that to my husband. So I'm in a position of power, and I'm going to make changes wherever I can. So one of the things I did for the training center is say, okay, we're all taking ABAR training, and we're going to make a difference. And this is going to help us be better teachers of adult learners. And this is going to help us design better curriculum for everyone. What could I do in terms of being ahead of school? Well, I started noticing many years ago that our faculty and staff was not very colorful. We didn't have many Black or brown people. So I have made that actually a priority over the last several years. I have also sent an African-American woman, one of my employees, I'm sponsoring her for training so that she may become a lead teacher in the classroom. Another thing that I did for my school is we really looked at our policies to see if they were offensive in any way, to see what we could do to make them more anti-bias, anti-racist. I have been purchasing books for our school, books by Black authors and Black illustrators, because I want to make sure that children see themselves reflected in the kind of literature that's offered to them. I am purchasing art that is more diverse, that will represent a more diverse group of people, so that people might look at a beautiful picture and say, oh, yeah, that looks just like me. So as a head of school, I'm trying to do many, many different things, including requiring ABAR training for my faculty and staff. Now, the other thing that I did is we have a chartered PTA in our school, and I asked, the very first thing I asked of them when they got chartered was, please, can you please sponsor a diversity fund? Which means that, could you please accept donations to start a diversity scholarship for our school? And they said, absolutely. And it's been about 5 years, and I have not been able to fund it. Well, this year, I said, that's it, I'm funding it myself, or the school's just going to fund it, because I want it funded just for the purpose of it being funded, to say that I'm giving, in this case, a young African-American child an opportunity that he or she may not have had. Now, in terms of my job as a classroom teacher, in terms of, let's say, grammar, some of the things that I'm doing are very subtle, but I think will have quite an impact. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm watching the names that I use. So instead of saying Judy and John, I might say Jamal, or I might say Omari, or another name that would be a little more representative of another group. Another thing, I love sentence analysis. Grammar's my jam. And I teach advanced grammar, and they do a lot of analyzing for advanced grammar, symbolizing for advanced grammar, and analyzing. So I've started to really think about what my sentences say. So for instance, an example of a sentence that I might give them now is Keisha and Jamal were assigned to write a report on food deserts and food swamps in America. So they have to symbolize it, they have to analyze it, but somebody is going to say to me, what's a food desert? What is a food swamp? I didn't know any of that until I took ABAR training, when I realized that food swamps are places off in America, well, all over the world, but we certainly have them in America, where the only source of food for low income is unhealthier kinds of food, fast foods, high in fats and things like that. A food desert would be a place where it is very difficult in these same low income areas to get fresh fruits and vegetables, to get a variety of produce and different kinds of healthy food. But again, I'm kind of planting those seeds so I can expand on that. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that we've been doing. In terms of world history, I am able to make a lot of changes. I will tell you though, one of the most profound things, one of the most profound memories I have from my ABAR training, I read a lot of wonderful articles and a lot of great articles. There's great books. There's all kinds of different things. So I read a lot of great articles. There's all kinds of great literature out there if you want to become, have a better understanding of anti-bias and anti-racist practices. And one of the memories that stuck with me more than anybody is that our ABAR teacher was talking to us about opportunities and different things. And so there were about maybe 12 of us, and we were on this Zoom session. And she said, okay, so this week we are going to talk about westward expansion. What does that mean? What does that mean to you, westward expansion? And so people were really excited because we're a bunch of history buffs, and they were like, oh, westward expansion. Wow, that means opportunity. That means owning your own land. That means finding riches. That means maybe, having a new business. That means expansion and all of this stuff. And do you know what she said? For whom? Who had those opportunities? It wasn't the brown or black people. It was Caucasian people. That hit me because I realized that my education and some of the education I'm giving is what would be considered Eurocentric. It's seen through a lens, a European lens, not through a different kind of lens, like an African lens, or certainly a lens of a slave or a descendant of a slave. So I knew that I had to make some changes with what we were doing.
So what do? We have to start somewhere. So we are what we see. So I decided to make my school and my classroom relatable to all children. And how we do this is through art, literature, culture, and leadership. Can all children see themselves in your classroom? So make sure that you have relatable items, whether you put up art, whether it's the literature you ask them to read, the cultural aspects of what you teach, and certainly your leadership style. You need to lead with an ABAR lens. These are some of the books that I that I purchased in terms of making our library a little more ABAR friendly, in terms of children can be anything they want to be, but they need to see that. They need to see that in the classroom. They need to see that in the school. They need to see reflections of themselves. So this is actually the upper elementary world history at a glance. So in fourth grade, We went on to teach the second timeline of life. We talked about evolution, DNA, the significance of the appearance of humans, archaeology, the second level of the timeline of humans, human migration, and then we began with Mesopotamia being the first civilization. Fifth years, we started talking about the four ancient or the ancient river civilizations, which the four classic ancient river civilizations would be Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, India, and then I went on to teach about Greece and then Rome and the contributions and the cultures of all of these. Then for sixth year, I went on to talk about the fall of Rome and the reasons for the fall of Rome and the Byzantine Empire. And then I went into the Dark Ages, Viking invasions, the Middle Ages, the Crusades, the Reformation, and the Renaissance. What I realized in my ABAR class is that I was teaching really from a European lens, European history, Western civilizations. And so I went back and I revisited our curriculum. So now for fourth grade, in addition to those things, I've also added ancient Persia along with that. For fifth year, instead of just doing Egypt, China, and India, I have now added the African kingdoms. Well, I've taught about Carthage, but Axum, Mali, Songhai, and Great Zimbabwe. I've also added Mesoamerica, which were the Olmecs. Olmec civilizations. That was Mesoamerican civilizations even before the Aztec, the Inca, and the Maya. And so I started thinking about what was happening around the world at that time, not just in Europe or Western Europe. And again, talking about the contributions and the cultures of all of these. So then when we get on to sixth grade, the fall of Rome, the Byzantine Empire, the Dark Ages, the Vikings, and then why I put the Middle Ages, the Crusades, the Reformation, and Renaissance in red was that those might now be deleted. I might not get into all of those because I'm now looking from a worldwide lens instead of just the European lens and what happens in Europe. And I used to think, okay, if I teach these, this is great. We get on the Reformation, the Renaissance, and then then Allison, who's actually the upper elementary teacher, starts with colonization in America from Europe, and it just kind of leads then into American history. But again, I am looking through a European lens, not through a lens of, there were things happening in the African kingdoms that contributed to world civilizations. So I've decided to change that whole lens. This is what our upper elementary world history shelves look like. And here are our new additions. So I am I'm creating material, purchasing books, making activities to support the new additions. One of the things that I did also is I wanted the children to change their lens. So when I start talking about ancient Mesopotamia to a group of Caucasian students, they automatically see the people in the civilization from their own lens. So when I started talking about Mesopotamia, the first thing I did is I brought out pictures because I wanted to start them immediately seeing people with brown or black skin. I didn't want them to picture ancient Mesopotamians as Caucasians. So I figured the easiest way to do it was to add some pictures. These are my pictures that I now bring out when I start talking about ancient Egypt. I want to disrupt complacency. And what that means is we tend to think of people in our own lens. And so when we would talk about ancient Egypt, again, people might imagine Caucasian individuals. And I wanted to disrupt that thought immediately by showing them pictures. So they had that picture in their mind as we went. I actually just purchased a book on ancient Carthage, And as I was reading it when I bought it, it's a children's book, and because ancient Carthage is where modern day Tunisia is in northern Africa. And as I was reading through, the information was very good, but I noticed that all the pictures had Caucasian people, and I was thinking, how is that right? In modern day Tunisia, how can that be right? So that was also something that now I begin to think about. I don't look just for whether the information is correct, but I look at the illustrations and see what they look like. And having all Caucasian people would not be accurate. One of the things that I do is when I talk about human migration or human civilizations, is again, I disrupt that idea of Caucasian, or we all look like, you know, who you are, by showing them this. This is an ancient early human. I don't know, maybe Homo habilis, Homo erectus, or something like that. And so I say, okay, so if we all started here, and we come out of the Great Rift Valley in Africa, if we all start here, and this is what we all looked at some point, because I want to disrupt, again, the way of thinking about ourselves. How do now we all look like this? I want to help the children understand that we didn't always look like we do now, that there are reasons why we look the way we do, that human beings, although we all started out looking something very similar, we don't anymore. Now we look like this. And why is that? Well, it's not because, you know, we were all born, you know, this way. Over hundreds of thousands of years, human beings have changed, just like everything has changed and mutated. All living things change over time. And we look the way we do now, not for any other reason than what nature has given us. That if you know, are darker skinned, still you probably live or hail from somewhere around the equator. You have more melanin in your skin. If you have lighter skin or lighter eyes or lighter hair, it might be some of the geographical influences, because you might live far away from the equator and you get less sun hitting your area directly. Or there's something called genetic bottlenecking, where a certain genetic trait was favorable, and that over time people began to look more similar. There are reasons because of the shape of your eyes help protect them from the sun, or certainly your skin color. So I really like to disrupt how children think of, well, you know, I've always looked like this. Well, actually, no, not 100, 200, 300, 400,000 years ago. So what is your lens? Earlier in this conversation, I talked about westward expansion and what did it mean for you? But you know what? What did it mean for African Americans? What did it mean for Native Americans? What did it mean for Mexicans? What did it mean for the Chinese? What did it mean for European immigrants? This whole idea kind of reminds me of these new films and movies that are coming out, like Maleficent, or something that is completely looked at from a completely different lens other than the one we generally think about. And our lens in this country, especially when we teach history, it is from the Caucasian lens. So why not look at it from a different kind of lens? So what can you do? Well, the first thing I would suggest is taking an anti-bias, anti-racist training, and learn to interrogate your position in your own lens. Understand the systems of racism. Learn how racism shapes our lives, and it does shape our lives. It shapes everybody's lives. Acknowledge racial trauma is real, and learn to disrupt patterns of racism. So start today. You can make changes to yourself, and you can make changes to your classroom. Even the smallest changes may make the greatest impact on our children. So that's what I did as a head of school, but more as an upper elementary teacher. I changed the things that I could to make all children feel that they were important and that they could identify themselves in my classroom. And another thing I just thought of, and then I'll end, is that for, in doing the great lessons, we also add a lot of people. I have children in my classroom who are Muslim. And when I started talking about numbers and about the history of numbers and the Arabic numerals and why we do our math from right to left as opposed to our reading, that harkens back to Arabic numerals. The smile on their faces that they actually told me that they read from right to left, and they wanted to bring in and show me some of their words that they're learning how to read in Arabic. That was a way that they feel included and that they were part of the classroom. And so what you need to do is start looking through multiple lenses, not just the lens that you grew up with and that you know. Thank you very much.